Hello everyone, I'm back and I decided to make another video, mostly because that first video I wasn't even sure if I was going to post it, but I got a really nice comment, just one, from one person who said that they enjoyed the video. And I mean, sometimes in life that's really all it takes to motivate you to keep going, especially for, someone that has dealt with narcissistic abuse. You're constantly hard on yourself. And I was actually seriously considering deleting the video. So to get some positive feedback, I decided to make another one. This one's going to be a short one. I'm going to limit the length of the video for the time that it takes me to finish this cup of coffee. But in lieu of doing a deep dive like I did last time. But let's just get right into it. So the topic that I wanted to talk about today was boundaries and how narcissists are constantly violating your boundaries or sort of probing for weakness to see if they can violate your boundaries. So I guess let's look at this in terms of a framework. So one very popular thing that my parents did growing up with me, and to some extent my sister, but more just me as the scapegoat, was they give gifts. Okay, narcissists are very fond of giving gifts, not all, but a lot, because it's a very seductive kind of tactic. Because what they can do is they give you a gift and then you owe them something. Okay? So it's not a gift in the way that when you receive a gift from someone else, it's like, hey, this is for you. This is for you to enjoy. No. The narcissist, what they do is they're giving that gift, and with that gift, there's these invisible strings attached to it. And I'll give you like a routine example. So my father, he splashed out on things like Christmas and birthdays. My sister and I, we had a comfortable upper middle class lifestyle in that regard. But then after Christmas, you get into January and those later months, and the claws come out. And if you do something that disappoints the narcissist, then they start bringing up the gifts. Who bought you that jacket? Who bought you that jacket? I did. Special deal. That's what my dad used to say. Drive me crazy. Special deal. This is one of his favorite pet sayings. He had lots of them, but that was among his favorite. And the funny thing about this is that, it doesn't matter, what you've done they can always bring up that gift. And sometimes these gifts are things that happened years ago. So to give a more recent example, I hadn't been home in 5 years. I'd been living abroad in Vietnam and Japan and China. More on that in another video. But I came home and I had gone no contact with my family for close to 2 or 3 years at that point. And we're having Thanksgiving together. And it's not going well. I'm there. My sister and her fiance are there, and I'm my partner, ex-partner now, are there. And somehow the topic of your disappointing childhood gets brought up, and my mother, she brings up, out of the blue, she's just like, yeah, I guess we were horrible parents. And I kind of joke with her. I was like, well, you had your moments. And she was like, yeah, we're horrible parents who paid for you to go to Europe. Kind of like screaming, that across the table. First of all, this is true in some regards. Of course, the narcissist is always stretching things, and that is to pull you into an emotional ringer. No mention of the fact that I had worked all summer to be able to afford to go, and then the deal was that they would match the amount of money that I earned to help me go, which of course is like a very nice thing to do. But again, we're talking about the context of a gift, which is not a gift. It's always ammunition to bring up later as a way to attack you in a moment of vulnerability. And all of this it's a form of manipulation. It's so that they can bring up something from the past in order to hurt you in the future at a later date, and use it to manipulate you to do what they want, to do their bidding. Another example of this is if you're given a gift and something should happen to that gift, then again, more ammunition, because you don't care. All of this is basically, it's not about the gift. It's anything as a pretext to dump their emotional pain onto you. Excuse me, to project onto you. That's the intention here. And it's trying to by design, trying to pull you into a kind of emotional ringer, trying to get you to step into the arena. That's what a narcissist is always trying to do, which is to get you emotional. Because once you're emotional, then you're on their turf. And once you're on their turf, you can't win. You can never win with a narcissist no matter what. But the only way to win is to purge yourself of emotion, kind of like a Spock Vulcan sort of idea. It's the only language they understand, because they themselves have this very fragile sense of self, which is always shifting, and they're dealing with these emotional currents, kind of like electricity, and they can't self-soothe because they're abused and messed up themselves. So what they're doing is they're constantly trying to channel that electrical current or those horrible feelings into you. And that's what's called narcissistic supply. So in terms of other examples, maybe I'm going to segue a bit. I'd said that I was going to talk about boundaries. So narcissists have no boundaries. So my dad would barge into my room trying to catch me, I don't know, doing something bad. I'll let you use your imagination for what that might be for like a 13, 14-year-old boy. He gave me a computer and then would go onto my computer and spy on me and go through all the websites I was going through. And some of that is just responsible parenting. Obviously, you don't want your kids going to like adult websites and things like that. But like, okay, I wasn't sure if I was going to get into this now, but let's just get into it. When I was 11, about 10 or 11 years old, so 4th grade, 5th grade, my dad introduced me to adult material. He's like, hey, this is the internet. This is how you can use it. And this is how you have access to this. And look, these are images of girls. In that case, I think he was showing me images of Jenny McCarthy, who's a popular celebrity at the time. And I was, of course, blown away, as any young adolescent boy would be. It's like, what? There's all these women and they don't have any clothes on, and they just existing in this sort of like universe of information. So naturally, what did I do? Of course, I tried to explore it on my own. And what then became the next 6 years, this cat and mouse game with my dad where he tried to catch me. Now, meanwhile, he was addicted to this material himself. So what's going on there is a kind of transference and a way for the narcissist to take their own bad behavior that they can't process or allow themselves to acknowledge, and then shame you as a way of talking or shaming themselves. Now, this obviously had long-standing complications, the likes of which that I won't get into now. But needless to say, I became addicted to it, and it's something that affects me to this day. And this is a problem for a lot of men, not just people that have, and women also, men more so, but obviously women, that, and I was going to say not just people that have experienced this kind of abuse. It's sort of an insidious thing. But yeah, it's terrible. So the other example I was going to give of like a boundary or some sort of, like boundary violation is my mother. So I used to, for a long time, I sort of processed this idea that I was only, abused in terms of boundaries by my dad. But my mother also. My mother was quite good looking when she was younger. She was an attractive person. I'm not attracted to my mother. I'm just like, I'm just, yeah, anyway, whatever this is. Yeah, you understand. So the point of this is when I was like 11, 12 years old, maybe younger, I could have been 10. I think it was 11 or 12 though. My best friend and I, we were over at the house. My mother was showing us photographs from her like college days. And like, we're going through these photos, and eventually we start coming to these photos of, like Polaroids. My mom was born in 47, so she's a product of the 60s. And this is the whole cool parent thing, quote unquote. We get to this photo, and it's her and her friend with whipped cream on their memories. And, I was like, Mom, like, what are you doing? She's like, oh, it was like one of these parties where we could just go as we feel. And so we just went like that. And I don't know what the point of, like trying to get some kind of validation from. It's just basically, the point of this is to say that, one, it's totally inappropriate to expose a minor to that kind of thing. Two, it embarrassed me in front of my friend, which is part of the intention. But then it's also like this idea of not being able to separate men from boys and what is appropriate or not appropriate. And this is a constant thread throughout my entire life. So what I was going to say here is my mother would treat me like an adult, but expect me to act like a child. So she'd spend the whole day telling me, we're going to lose the house. We don't have enough money. Your dad's abusing me. I'm being abused by him. I'm sad. I cheated on your father. She told me when I was 12 or 13 that she had an extramarital affair. Do you blame me for that? I was just her therapist. But my dad, on the other hand, he treated me like a child, no matter what I did. But he expected me to act like an adult. So, you understand, like, crazy making there? It was just insanity. So no matter what I did, he would say things like, "You are 12 years old. It's time to start acting like an adult." Or "You're 13 years old, or you're 15 years old, or you're 16, or you're 18, or you're 20. I thought this existential phase of frat boy self-destruction was going to end." Doesn't matter. It's just nitpicking. But the point is that you have one parent who's treating you like an adult, but then expecting you to like act like a child, like, "Oh, like, yeah, I just got through telling you about a bunch of abuse that I experienced. Go ahead, go watch your cartoons, go watch X-Men. Go be a kid, go draw." After being exposed to this adult reality. And then the other person treating you like a child with the knowledge of all this abuse that is going on, but then expecting you to not behave like a child is supposed to behave. So not expressing emotion, not expressing any sort of excitement or having a loud voice. My dad expected me to like conduct myself like a little adult from the time I was like 10 or 11 years old. He would say things to me like, let's say we're having soup during dinner, be like, "Spoon away from yourself." You know what I mean? Like, what are you supposed to do with that? Kind of like, sort of like mannered, like school of etiquette when you're like 11 or 12 years old. And like, for a while he was insisting that my sister and I answer the phone and say our last name before we answer the phone. So, "Such and such residence, Alex speaking. Can I help you?" The other thing that my parents expected us to do is to take detailed notes from the time we were 11 or 12 years old, because they both worked from home sometimes. And so we were expected to conduct ourselves really professionally and in an adult manner on the phone, and then to take down notes, to take down information, to leave that information in a binder that was next to our phone in the kitchen, so that should someone call or have called, they could look through that binder and then we would have legible notes for them when they arrived at home. And I remember one time in particular, my dad told me that he had written someone a very strongly worded letter or email because I didn't alert him to the fact that this person had called. And I can't remember exactly. Maybe it's true. That could very well be true. Keep in mind, I was 11 or 12 years old, which at the time I felt terrible, like I had let him down. But it's like, I wasn't getting, it's not, this was effectively like being a secretary, but it's not like this was not like part of chores. It wasn't like, hey, like, you're going to take on this responsibility. And then for this responsibility, you're going to receive either some praise or privileges or, it was just assumed to do this. I'm not suggesting I should have been paid for this, but that there should have been some, at least emotional praising for having done a good job. No, this was just an expectation. So this stuff just can, it goes on and on and on. And again, the threat of the boundary pushing is always there. You know that no matter what you do, like you can't succeed. Like you can't do anything right. And eventually what that does is that that translates to your sense of self, because you're not getting any emotional validation. You're getting these crumbs of emotional support. And these crumbs of emotional support are always when you're like appealing to the sensibilities of the narcissist. So it had to be something that my mother and father related to, or that they could engage with. If they couldn't engage with it themselves, they were not interested in hearing about it. Or if they determined that it was bad or not of interest to them, then they just check out. Doesn't matter what you're interested in. It's largely irrelevant, actually. They could care less. It's just not something that they'll just kind of dismiss it. And that carried on all through life, mostly through childhood, through teenage years, through adulthood. I lived in Vietnam for 7 years. My parents never once asked me a single question about my time in Vietnam, not one. I became a musician while I was there. My father, he decided, because I wasn't given piano training, which he gave to my sister, but not me, that there's no way that I could be a musician. So he ordered my mother not to ever acknowledge that, I could play music. My parents had a piano growing up, and I started teaching myself to play when I was about 20 years old. And they sold it because, in my father's words, no one in the family knew how to play piano. And all this is, it's just all designed to hurt you. And basically just to make you feel awful. Like you're worthless. I remember, I'll just tell one quick story. I taught myself to play piano, and I learned this little like chord progression, and I wanted to show my dad's mother before she died. And I was playing the piano, and later my dad said, "You play piano horribly. You play piano and it drives your mother and I crazy. It's so awful. You just bang on the keys and you make a bunch of noise and you're so bad and you think you're good, but you're not." Anything they can say to hurt you, especially if it's important to you. What I forgot to mention earlier in terms of the gift giving is this process, by the way, it's called soul murder. And it's where they find something that you're interested in or that you take an interest in, and they find a way to kill it. And it's insidious the way that they go about it. But this ties into the whole gift giving thing. So my dad gave me a video camera when I was a kid so that I could make movies. And I was making lots of films. I wanted to be a film director from the time I was about 10 or 11 years old because my family watched a lot of movies and I love cinema. And I had a video, and the dogs were, I used, incorporated pets into the videos a lot. We had 2 dogs growing up, and the dogs were licking the camera. Any other parent, if they wanted to get a kid to stop that, would be like, "Hey, you got to take good care of this camera. Like, don't have the dogs lick the camera." My dad looked at me and he was like, "You let the dog Look, the camera. You don't respect the camera. You took it away from me and shook me like this. And I never made another video again. That was the point. When I was a kid, I would do drawings. I mentioned this in the last video. He was like, these drawings are sick. Because, you know, as a kid, just copying what you see in movies and stuff like that. Some of my drawings were like kind of like violent, you know, like someone stabbing a goblin or, you know, whatever stuff kids draw, you know, and he's like, these are sick drawings. Are you a sick person? Are you? And as a kid, you don't know. You don't have the psychological, emotional tools to self-diagnose. I tried as best I could at that age. Anyway, that's probably enough for now. But what I was going to say is, whether you're dealing with your parents or whether you're dealing with a partner, gifts are not gifts. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's an act of service. It doesn't matter if it's words of praise. It doesn't matter if it's a physical gift. It doesn't matter if it's a vacation. It is all designed for one aim, and that is control. And controlling you and making sure that you comply with a very fluid sense of rules and regulations that is constantly changing. When you are living and dealing with a narcissist, whether this is a partner, and this applies to multiple cluster B personalities, but for the purposes of this discussion, let's just talk about narcissism, because that's what I'm most intimately familiar with as far as my family is concerned. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is. The point is to control, like I was saying, with the rules, and it's always shape-shifting, okay? It's what I like to call, like, there's that song by X, "This is the game that moves as you play." That's exactly what living with a narcissist is like. It is like, it's like, okay, we're playing poker. So you're playing poker. You start to win. Like, you win a hand. Narcissist is like, we're not playing poker. We're playing Monopoly. And it's like, what? We're playing Monopoly? And they're like, oh, yeah, Monopoly. And then suddenly, like, you know, they're like getting out all the Monopoly pieces and the money. And then you're like, okay. And you're like trying to like adjust to the transition from poker to Monopoly. And you're, as a kid, you're trying to like, okay, mentally like scene change in your head. And then right as you transition into Monopoly, it's like, we're not playing Monopoly. We're playing Scrabble. You thought we were playing Monopoly? No, there's no free parking here. This is Scrabble. It's time to unravel the words and, you know. And it's like walking on eggshells, and some of those eggshells have landmines. And the only way that I know how to describe this is it's like being on a roller coaster going through a casino. And like you're riding the roller coaster and you're playing slot machines at the same time. And then suddenly out of nowhere, you start going into loops. So like a blind roller coaster casino. That's what it's like to live with these kinds of people. And the effect that it has is crazy making. It makes you feel crazy. It makes you feel insane. And you never feel safe. Your central nervous system is just constantly on high alert. Your stress, cortisol levels are flying all over the place, and you're just in this constant state of distress. And the threat of physical violence, mental violence, It's probably going to get demonetized, but let's just say intimate violence is always there. And this is the topic for another video, but you think this is going to end when you leave, when you get out and you move away and you go to college, or you should move out of the house. But it continues forever. It's never ending. And one of the hardest things about it is once you start becoming an adult, one, you realize you have all these deficits in terms of your character. Like in some ways you're like, you know, like you're 40 when you're 20, but in other ways you're still like a little kid because you're super emotionally dysregulated. So in college, you know, I got very lucky that I had like some really close friends. And that's a topic for another video, but like that helped me. But you know, it's not the same as having a parent. It just isn't. You know, like and I am lucky in a lot of ways that I still had I had some good people in my life. But I'm 38 now. I mentioned that in the last video. And as I look back on my life, the thing that I am sad about at times is I wish that when I was 19, I could have just been 19 and owned that, and, you know, like not had all this emotional baggage. And of course, a lot of people have emotional baggage in their lives. But as anyone who has experienced abuse, alcoholic abuse, just parental abuse, but especially narcissistic abuse, can tell you, like, I spent those years lost. You know, when I would have liked to have had learned to have healthy, intimate relationships with, you know, other people, I was just trying to like pull myself together. And as a result, you know, it led me down this path of basically only relating to other people that have been abused, and, you know, getting pulled into relationships with other people that have had unresolved abandonment issues or trauma. But that's a video for another time. I am basically done with my cup of coffee, and yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks for listening.
Hurtful shit about my parents because of you know, what I see as their irresponsible parenting skills, that they got it coming, and I don't have the fundamental respect we're supposed to afford them. When you have narcissistic parents, you're an appendage. So, you know.
Also, it's very unusual to have two narcissistic parents. Oftentimes you'll have a narcissist and then, you know, kind of an enabler.
Codependent, yeah.
Yeah. When there's a flavor of that with both, it leads to a lot of kind of exactly what you described, this kind
rudderless,
of floating. It's
you've got to build you.
Correct.
And you sort of emulate and see what sticks until you know, become who you are. When you have these type of parents, is that you do not know how to receive or give love properly.
Let's have a full stop there, because I kind of feel like that needs a little room to breathe.